Hi, I'm Sean Perrin, and you're listening to episode 146 of the Clarinet Podcast, the show for clarinetists. In today's episode, we are again joined by guest host Richard Hawkins, who is a master mouthpiece craftsman and professor of clarinet at the Oberlin Conservatory. His guest today is Stephen Williamson, who is principal clarinetist of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. They discuss why you need to be an interesting musician, the importance of different perspectives, studying the German system clarinet, finding balance in life during this current pandemic situation, and dealing with nerves during performance. Before we do get started today, I want to thank our 75 Patreon backers and our sponsors for helping make the show possible. If you'd like to access an extended ad-free version of this show and many others, you can become a patron at clarinet.com/subscribe, and I truly appreciate your support. In fact, the supporters this month were able to help me buy a new audio interface for the podcast. You might wonder where the podcast was this month, and I had an unbelievable amount of problems after my first interface, which I bought way back in 2014, or actually 2012, I think, but it failed. I don't know what was going on, but I kept buying things and they would break and they weren't working right. But I finally settled on a new interface called the Zoom L8, and this has a fantastic feature which actually allows me to plug in my phone and record calls directly into the unit. Now, the really amazing thing about this, I can actually, with a simple press of a button, I can record a backup onto an SD card at the same time. And the truly amazing thing is that I can actually take this on the road without my computer, plug in some microphones, and record anywhere that I want to. It's an incredible unit. I'm so happy to have upgraded the podcast to this, and it's really helping me to create the best content that I possibly can. So thank you to everyone and our sponsors for taking the Clarinet Podcast, as always, to the next level. Imagine a read that lets you focus on your music, lasts for months instead of days, and even saves you money in the long run. It's all possible with Legere Reads, the world's leading synthetic reed brand made right here in Canada. The European cut reed is preferred by Legere artists all over the world, including Eddie Daniels, David Schifrin, Corrado Giuffretti, and many others. It offers a warm, clean sound with great ease of articulation and is now available for E-flat, B-flat, and the bass clarinet. Learn more at your local music store or at legere.com. That's legere.com. Take your playing to the next level with Bakun Musical Services. With 14-day trials, free shipping on eligible orders, and expert advice, you can be sure you're making the best choice for your musical needs. For Canadian customers, be sure to check out the new store that allows you to pay in Canadian dollars. And for everyone listening, I have an exclusive coupon just for you for listening to the podcast. You can use code Clarinet at checkout for 10% off your next purchase, whether it be a mouthpiece, barrel, or even a custom clarinet at bakunmusical.com. Again, that's code Clarinet at bakunmusical.com. As a side note, Bakun is now also carrying Legere Reads, so you might want to check those out as well with, for example, the Vocalese mouthpiece, which pairs really, really well with the Legere Reed products. Clarinet is also supported now by Audible, which is my favorite way to read. I'm currently listening to a book called The Wim Hof Method, which is not only the story of this man's highly amazing life, but how his now famous breathing and cold therapy method will activate your full human potential. I'm on day 7 of trying this out, and I look forward to discussing this actually with some other musicians who've also been experimenting with the method on a future episode of the show. You can get your free ebook by starting a free trial of Audible today at clarinet.com/audible. That's clarinet.com/audible.
Steve, wow, it's so great to see you.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. This is awesome.
Thanks so much for doing this. And unbeknownst to most people, you and I have actually never met in person before.
No, but you know what's strange? I think is it true we actually were at Allstate in Texas together in some sort of performance? Somebody posted something a while ago that had our names next to each other. I don't even know what we were playing, but I saw your name. I'm like, I didn't know I knew Richard Hawkins. We were sitting right next to each other.
Isn't that crazy? It's crazy. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up, actually.
Well, I was actually born in Denver, Colorado, but I spent, I would say, most of my life in Texas primarily. Before I moved back and forth. So my first kindergarten through third grade, or second grade rather, was in a little town near Corpus Christi in Texas called Beeville. Very tiny little town. My dad is band director there for the high school. And then we moved up to Wyoming, where my dad went to school. And so Wyoming, we sort of went around to a few different places there for about 2 or 3 years. Then I moved back. My dad got a job in Austin, and that's where I stayed for most of my, all the way through high school. So junior high and high school were in Austin, Texas. My dad was the high school band director. So for 4 years, I was, his clarinetist.
That's awesome. So, I mean, I grew up in Houston originally, and in fact, I have a family in Austin still, and go down there quite a bit. And it was an interesting place to grow up, being a clarinet player, because we learned so many of the sort of fundamental methods of playing the clarinet in the band world, especially down there, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I hardly played in orchestra. If it wasn't for all-state orchestra and maybe an occasional region or an all-city orchestra, we didn't have. I mean, we had a string orchestra at our high school, but it was really just a string orchestra. They didn't have any winds or brass or percussion. So that was it for me. Band was it, and I learned only mostly band transcriptions of orchestral works.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I learned them all in the wrong key on the wrong. Oh my God! By the time I got to my freshman year at Eastman, we had auditions, for ensemble placement, and I was so frustrated because Capriccio Español was on the wrong instrument. Herzog was on the. I just was so unprepared, or I thought I was, but at least, technically we played more notes because we're playing violin parts all the time.
Right, all the tutti spots, right?
Exactly. So, in a way, I gained some technical skills, but I was green. I was as green as they come when it came to orchestral music. So,
I still tell some of my students, every once in a while when I think about it, like, I didn't even know what Mahler was until I went to college. Like, I just didn't know any of that repertoire, It's kind of amazing, all the stuff that we didn't know. And now, of course, the society is saturated with so many places to go to listen to music, and it's really fascinating to see that students are almost sometimes struggling to find places to hear things, even though it's all out there. It's amazing. So yeah. So when you left to go to Eastman, then for your undergraduate, you spent 4 years in Rochester.
Yep, 4 years.
And tell us a little bit more about that experience and afterwards.
Well, the first 2 years, my freshman and sophomore year, I studied with Michael Webster, who is down in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
I know he teaches at Rice as well, Rice University. But I was really lucky because after Michael Webster, so the combination of Michael Webster and Ken Grant were my teachers. Mm-hmm. So junior senior year was Ken Grant, and they're both students from Stanley Hasty's studio. The first 2 years was essential. My studies with Mr. Webster, because not only did he teach me really some strong fundamentals, he really started to open my eyes and ears to the orchestral repertoire, which we really needed to focus on, because like I said, I was super, super green. But he also was an extraordinary reed maker. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to make reeds from scratch. It was really, really, it was an uphill battle for a while, personally, just because, the amount of patience that it took was, at first I thought, I'm getting nowhere. But then all of a sudden, it just clicked. And then I was able to really enjoy the process, and the end result for me was fantastic. So I'm really grateful, because even though I learned so many other fundamentals from him, I would say the greatest thing that I learned from him was reed making. And being able to use, now, I basically use commercial reeds, but I'm able to work on them in a really, it's not as tedious as I think it is for most people for me, because I had such good instruction. Mm-hmm. So I do that. But then after that, I went, Mr. Webster left to go, he was living in Boston, and the commute was too much, and he was coming every 2 weeks, and we were just sort of cramming every 2 weeks for lessons. And I think it was a tough schedule for him. So he decided to stay in Boston, and then I had to transfer into another studio. And there were two teachers there at the time. There was Ken Grand and Charles Neidig. And I took lessons from both of them. And to be perfectly honest, I ended up studying with Charlie at Juilliard. But at that time, I was so not ready to be a student of Charlie, because for me, like, his brain was moving so fast, and he was constantly, honestly, everything was way over my head.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
And he was so nice to me. And, you know, I think he was willing to take me to a studio, but I personally felt like, I don't know if I can keep up. And for me, going into Kenny Grant's studio was a perfect fit for me at that time, because it just enhanced what I already was learning. And we were going further and further into more orchestral work. I think I got a really great orchestral foundation because of those 4 years. And then I really wanted to pursue solo career. And I got a Fulbright. I applied for a Fulbright, and I got a Fulbright to go to Berlin for 1 year, but then I extended it for a second year. So I was there pretty much focusing. I wanted to learn the German system, first of all. That was my statement of proposed study. But then to basically immerse myself in solo and chamber works was also another big thing for me. And so I did a lot of competitions, both chamber music competitions and solo competitions. And that was a great experience for me. And to be, to basically immerse yourself in another culture where I didn't speak English for almost 2 years. I mean, amazing. I would occasionally with another Fulbrighter from America that happened to live in the dormitory with me, but most of the time it was as it should be. It was really a great experience, and to go hear the Berlin Philharmonic as much as I was able to do was a real treat. So that was my second, the following 2 years. And I did the ARD competition in the end of my second year. And that's when Charlie Neidig was on the jury. And I got into the semifinal round that year for that audition, that competition. And he came up to me afterwards, and he was so nice. And he said, I really think you sound great. I was pushing for you the whole way, as were several other jury members. But the thing, competitions are crazy. It's just like auditions. You just don't know. And music is so subjective. It was, I was just happy I got as far as I did. But that's when he said, hey, if you want to come to, when you come back to the States, you should audition. And I would love to be able to teach you. So that's when I auditioned for Juilliard. And then I studied with Charlie for 2 years for my master's.
Yeah. Amazing guy. I mean, just, your comment about sort of being way above, right? I mean, he could spend so much time on something that is just so important, and you get just an amazing amount of knowledge from him. It's really, really incredible. I've always enjoyed listening to him. He's been to Oberlin a few times and done some classes here, and came with the quintet a few years back. And it was amazing. Yeah, just amazing.
I learned so much from him, especially about sort of breaking out of he constantly, he said, look, you're a very fine player, but you're very Aristotelian. And I'm like, what is that? Of course, he's helping me delve deeper into myself, learning more about what that adjective actually really meant. And he said, you have two colors. You're either loud or soft. There's nothing in between. And I was like, oh my God, I feel horrible. That's all I have. And so he really challenged me to broaden the amount of color and take more chances as a musician, step away from sort of the putting it in a box. Like, right. I mean, we try to teach our students, look, you can't reach for the stars until you get the bare bones of what the piece is really about. And I really am grateful that he knew that I had the bare bones. He wanted me to be much more interesting as a musician, and so he challenged me. I'll never forget one time I was playing the Oberlin Concerto. I was really excited about it. I was like, finally get to play the Oberlin Concerto for Charlie and I. This is such a huge thrill. And I win. It was up on the 5th floor, I think, of Juilliard. We were in this room, and I'm starting to play it, and I'm about, I don't know, I'm through the bulk of the first part of the concerto, you know, and I'm about to get into the cadenza, and then I notice he opens one of the closet doors. There were about like 7 closets, just standing giant wardrobes, and he opens one of the closet doors, and he goes inside the closet and he shuts the door. Now, I'd seen him before do something similar where he just said, you know, if I leave the room, keep playing. And I'm like, so I just kept playing. So I get through the cadenza. I'm like, he's not coming out. So then I keep going, and I get to, I'm on the last page of the whole, I mean, we're talking about 12, 13 minutes go by. And the weirdest thing is occasionally I hear a little boom, boom, boom in the closet. And I was like, what's going on? Just keep playing, finish the piece. So I get to the gliss at the end, and I finish the piece, and all of a sudden I hear and the door bursts open, and he jumps onto the sofa in front of me, and he acts very calm, and he says, in measure so-and-so and so-and-so, you should have done this and this, and you forgot to do this, and you forgot. And my eyes were just out of my head, and I was kind of like, I said, were you locked in that closet? Did you get locked in the closet? He said, absolutely not. I was listening, and I wanted to hear everything from a different perspective. And I went, okay. So to this day, I still don't know. I think he was locked in there, but the funny thing was, he's still listening to me, and he was as critical as ever. And I'm always grateful for everything that he had to say, because it was really, it was always spot on. So it's fantastic.
Amazing. Oh, that's amazing. Wow.
Crazy fun.
So, I mean, we probably, this question is probably something that we would both answer the same way, just because, you know, growing up and being in that sort of the band system and going through, you know, the regionals and all state and all that kind of stuff, you know. But I guess I would ask you, you know, as a youth, what were some of the method books that you used for yourself? And, you know, do you still use the same method now, or do you have some differences of you know, repertoire and things that you work with your students with?
You know, it's interesting. That's a good question, because I basically did what everybody was doing at Texas at the time. So there would be your 3 etudes, and that could be usually the Rose etudes, or by my junior, senior year, they were doing a bunch of David Height etudes as well. But my teacher, who I'm so grateful for, she was fantastic, and she still plays. She plays in the Austin Community Band,
Cool.
or wind ensemble. I can't remember, in Austin, and she's a fantastic clarinetist, and she was really successful with Mary Kay Cosmetics. So her career was shooting off with Mary Kay, and she started to just chop down her studio because she didn't have time. And I was so grateful that she kept me. I think I was her only student by the time I was in my junior and senior year.
Wow.
She was so kind to still keep teaching me, and I was really grateful. We mainly worked out of Rose etudes, an occasional Jean, but mostly the Closet, Prescott. We just, I mean, I did that book from, you know, front to back. And then she'd always pull me back when certain things weren't lining up, and she'd give me more scale studies and thirds.
Page 123. Page 123.
That would be my opening. I would have to come in and play that at the beginning of every lesson.
I did the same thing.
She always would make sure that I wasn't getting lazy.
Right. Long tones and page 123, right?
I'm telling you, but the truth is, at this time in my life, I don't do any of those, and I'm probably paying a very, very drastic price for it. But I do, and so to answer your question, what I do with my students, most of the time, most of my students are graduate students, and occasionally I'll pick up an undergraduate student here and there who for me, I feel like is very advanced, and I work mostly on musical interpretation. If there's a technical issue that comes up, and they do, then I will assess a particular exercise or an etude that will help them get through whatever the difficult technical work that they might be experiencing. But most of the time, I find a musical way to help them overcome whatever is happening technically, and that usually fixes the problem. Yeah. And they go on their merry way, and that problem doesn't come up again. As far as I don't know, as far as etude books, I still occasionally go to. I do a lot of. Just lately, I've opened up the Grand Etudes by Delacluse for my students because they replicate the ideas from certain standard works in their orchestral repertoire. Look, most of the students that come to me want to win a job, an orchestral job. So I spend a lot of my time working orchestral excerpts, and then of course the standard concerti and solo works that I think you just need to have always under your belt, just in case. You know, sometimes in final rounds with the orchestral auditions, they'll ask for, they're always going to ask either the Mozart Clarinet Concerto or Premier Rhapsody. But I've also seen where they're like, please bring a solo piece of your choice. And so I want to make sure that it's something that's not only user-friendly or listener-friendly, but also can show off their talents. So everybody's got a special gift, maybe more than one. But I know that if you find works that really embody that person's nature, I think that they end up playing their best because it fits them. Certain works for me, certain works in the French repertoire do not fit me. And it was funny because a lot of times when I was studying the German system, that's extremely difficult. A lot of the French repertoire is extremely difficult on the German system. And I would find it was interesting that even while I was there, they would shy away from some of the French repertoire. It just felt horrible to play, and it was just it was a tendonitis central type of piece for them. So I started learning most of the French repertoire by the time I was studying with Charlie. So most of the stuff in the beginning was really German works mostly.
Well, speaking of the German clarinet, I think it was in the early '90s when I was on a tour with Eddie Daniels and Sabina Meyer, where we're doing this quintet music in Hanover, and we had to play. I think it was 445, maybe something like that, right? And so it was interesting to do that. But I got turned on by the German clarinet too. So I also have a set that I use occasionally, and it was really amazingly good for the technique. Just like at first it's very frustrating, and you try to figure it out, but there's some things that are easier and some things that are way harder. So in talking about that particular instrument and your experience with it, I mean, you must know that in the 90s Chicago Symphony in fact used German clarinets, and I always thought it was fascinating when Larry sort of started talking about it, and all of a sudden they all had Wurlitzer clarinets, right? And they're probably still there somewhere, right? I mean,
there are, unfortunately, one instrument is gone, and that's the Wurlitzer bass clarinet. Nobody knows what happened to it, so it's a real shame because apparently it was a really, really nice instrument, and I think it fell through the cracks. Unfortunately, somebody's got it somewhere.
So, do you still play any German system?
Occasionally. I'll pull it out if I need to be reminded of if it's Schubert or Brahms, where I need to be reminded of the evenness between registers. And even though it's ergonomically more difficult, I always felt that the inherent intonation and evenness of sound between all the registers was really one of the things that attracted me the most to the instrument. So I pull it out occasionally for stuff like that. But in my studies, I mean, I spent about 6 months I put the French system away and I just was on the German system for about 6 months. And by the end, I was starting to really like delve into, difficult works like Daphnis and, oh my God, what else was I? The Sport 2. I was trying to really I got this. I feel like I got this, right?
That's
and
great.
I go in and I play for my teacher. His name was Peter Rieckhoff. He's a wonderful, he passed away, unfortunately, a while ago, but he was a wonderful, wonderful teacher that taught at the Hochschule der Künste. And I came in and I started to play, and he sat back, and I really felt like it was the best I could do, considering I'm not a native of the German clarinet.
Right.
And he stopped for a second and he said, "You got all the notes." He said, "That's just great." He goes, "But you know what? It's not your voice." And I went, "Oh, don't feel bad." He said, "I really think you can take the sound that you're looking for in the German system and put it into the French system. Put it into your instrument." And he was so spot on, because once I started subbing in some orchestras in town, my instrument had a wraparound key that goes around the front. So it wasn't German system, but it looked like German system and far enough away. And the section knew, like the section would know, but they kept it cool because they're like, this guy sounds good. And I didn't even change my barrels. That's how weird it was. Like I just, for some reason, was playing at 446, after a period of time, like, because that's all you heard. I was just hearing this incredibly high pitch, and I just sort of adapted to it. The problem was when I came back to the States, and I was taking some like a concert artist guild competition like that. I came back like 2 to 3 weeks in advance to try to pull myself back to 440 because I had to play with piano, and that was so difficult.
I bet.
But I didn't have any money. I didn't have like extra barrels. I didn't have, so I had to try to just do it with what I had.
Amazing.
And that was a tough one. But it after a while, I find that if it's in your ear, it can come through the instrument, but it has to be in your ear, and that's an adjustment period that you've got to just deal with. Now, of course, I use equipment, because if I have to jump from. Sometimes I'll play over in Japan. I'll play with an orchestra that's 442, 443. Okay, I have all the equipment now. I don't have to. I don't have to wait too long to adjust. My ears are adjusting, but to get the equipment just right, it's much better to have a setup that works with
I was always amazed by Sabina, actually, because I think it was the Stamets recordings. She told me amazing, right? So beautiful. Some of my most favorite recordings of the clarinet period. I mean, just amazing. And I remember asking her, because it was around that time that I met her. It was right after that recording, and that was the very first time, if I'm not mistaken, that she told me that it was the first time she'd ever have to play 440, and it was with St. Martin in the Fields. And all she did was change the mouthpiece, because she was using, I think it was either her father's or her grandfather's mouthpiece that she was playing, and it was a Wurlitzer mouthpiece, a wooden Wurlitzer, and that's all she did for the German clarinet, was just change the mouthpiece to go from such a high pitch to a low pitch for her.
I think it's amazing, and I love those recordings. I mean, she is she's one of a kind.
Absolutely.
I love her playing.
So what's on your stand these days?
Oh man. Just because it's on the stand doesn't mean I'm doing anything.
You know
what I mean. No, I'm trying. I am trying to keep up a regiment. It was so much easier in the very beginning of this pandemic, because I was like, wow, okay, I got all this time. So I'm really going to delve into some things that I know I never gave enough attention to. So like a lot of, like I said, it wasn't scales and it wasn't arpeggios and it wasn't any of that stuff, but I was delving into technical works that I always wanted to spend a little bit more, you know, woodshedding.
Quality time, right?
Exactly. And so I immediately went to the Corigliano Concerto, and then I went to the Nielsen Concerto. Those two are on my stand all the time. And then I went to the Brahms Quintet, because there are still moments in there where there's a slight bit of a, you know, in the gypsy flourishes that happen, I start to have a moment of panic. Like, okay, am I really going to pop that F sharp out, or am I going to get that high A? Because so I slowed things down. And then, of course, what I usually tell my students to do, you know, you take certain groupings of notes, you hold the first one, you play the rest of them as fast as possible. And then you do the second note and do the rest of them as fast as possible. So I kept trying to get my technique to sound more effortless, so I could really enjoy the music making rather than get caught up in the technique. And that kind of private, you know, as I call it, very revealing mirror is right in front of you. You know what your flaws are, and you have to face them. So doing that has been really, really helpful. Now, like I said in the beginning, I had a lot of time, and I had a lot of focus. I was really, I was hitting it hard. And about the fourth week of the pandemic, I almost burned out, and I just sort of sat back from the clarinet a little bit, and I said, you know, I'm not getting a balance in my life. Like I needed to get outside a lot more. I needed to do other things. What I also do now is I go back to recordings that I used to listen to, or things that I've always wanted to hear. Now, like you say, with technology today, you go on YouTube, you can hear anything you want. It's almost everything is accessible. So I go to the Met Opera website, because there were so many operas that I performed that I never even got to see. I didn't have time to see an HD broadcast or something I did.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great idea. That's a cool idea.
So it was really helpful for me to see productions and hear how I would play things differently now. Sort of I think coming from the world of opera into the symphonic world has been a change, and I feel like there are things now that I would do differently for sure. But I always say that. It's like whatever I did yesterday isn't good enough for me today anyway, so I've got to keep pushing the envelope and find a better way, or higher. I keep trying to raise the bar.
Sure, absolutely. Do you get nervous?
Oh, every day.
Every day. So how do you deal with that? What's your process?
Well, you know, oddly, I think I get more nervous now that I'm older. I think I was less nervous, and the fact that we came through the Texas high school, junior high and high school programs where you would audition in front of everybody else. Yeah. Right. Like there was a screen, but that was just for the three jurors.
Right. Everybody else was sitting right next to you.
In the same room with you, moving their fingers while you're playing. Like they're playing the same etude while you're hearing all this extra noise. Yeah. And sometimes people are dropping pencils. Sure. I'm not saying they're doing it intentionally, but there are times when I could feel some competitors going a little bit overboard and, you know, just staring you down. And oh my God, it was like I don't know. I associate it with, like, say, the gladiators in the Colosseum. It's like, you know, it's like this or this, and you're like, good God. So I developed a tough skin. I think you had to. You had to really, really be. Now look, we're talking about 3 etudes, and I don't know how many endless hours, and I know you were the same, that you spent working on that stuff, to where it was always basically not only for memory, but you could write it out if you had to.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I can still pick them up and play them exactly the same way as I used to. Like, absolutely. And I haven't seen them in 25, 35 years, you know?
I know. It's exactly the same way.
Kind of amazing.
It is amazing. I mean, I think that type of discipline was I mean, I wish I had that kind of discipline now. Like, if I could just tackle certain... So, in a way, the pandemic has been, if there is a silver lining, I know that I had the ability and the time to really hone in on some of these things that I've always wanted to do, like I did when I was in, you know, in Texas back in the day. But I do know that I had so much more, I don't know, I had so much more confidence in myself, and I was not afraid to tackle the challenge. And I think I carried that with me for a very long time. But by the time, I was starting to audition for professional orchestral jobs, it felt so different. I didn't like the screen and the emptiness of no one around you. So it was a completely different ballgame. I've learned to figure it out, and it took a while. But once I figured it out, I was like, oh, they're all in the room with you. Just imagine they're all staring at you. If that helps you. Overcoming fear for me was, first of all, remembering that there's two kinds of fear, in my opinion. One is you're unprepared. So, yeah, you should be afraid. Or if you are prepared and you're afraid, it just means that you care so much that you're letting fear as a negative energy take you over. So I would tell myself, look, that's not negative energy now. That's positive energy, because if you transfer it into something that's positive, you're going to all of a sudden realize that that's your confidence. So understanding that if you're afraid, and you are prepared. So just try to be prepared. You can't be prepared for everything, but you try your best. And if you know that you're nervous, you say, hey, I'm glad I'm nervous. Yeah, I remember telling myself every time, once things started to go my way, I was like, embrace it, use it. Come on, I'm going to turn that into something positive. And the next thing you know, you're playing the way that you know is the best representation of yourself. And once you do that, there's nothing you can't do.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great answer. I mean, I think that's really interesting. I never thought about that, as being a kid and growing up in that sort of situation when you're just playing for everyone all the time. And of course, Interlochen was like that for a long time, where, all the students would have to play weekly challenges, they called them. So you'd be challenging for your chair, right? And
we had that. I had that in my band all the time, from junior high on.
Yeah.
But
and a part of that, of course, would be, just the fact that when you're young, you're not aware, you're not aware of even how nerve-wracking it can be, right? And as we get older, we start to feel these strange sort of feelings about nerves and things that show up, and it's not out of a lack of preparation. Usually, it's just mental, just.
I do agree. I think a lot of it too is that as we get older, our standards get higher.
For sure, yeah.
And then
especially since we are all these amazing young talents that are.
Forget it! It's crazy. I'm always stunned when I say to a particular student, I said, "Oh no, you need to do this completely differently. You need to try this fingering and this fingering and this fingering." And they stop for a second. They're like, "Okay," and then they go, and they feel it. And I went, okay, well, I guess my job is done here.
Speaking of talents, that's actually a talent that is really highly valuable in our world, is remembering fingerings. It's like we grew up knowing phone numbers, right? And students now, I find it's difficult sometimes to remember fingerings. And that's just something that you just got to do, because, gosh, there's so many out there you can use that can fix problems so easily.
Oh, it's great. It's great. I used to, it's funny. I don't know if you had this when you were studying, when you were younger, but when I got to Eastman and I started studying with Mike Webster, he did have he knew so many different fingerings for everything. And the crazy thing was then, so I started learning all these alternative fingerings, and it was really super helpful, especially on E-flat clarinet, because for me, the instrument itself is all made up of fake fingerings. Just the whole world of E-flat clarinet is fake.
Yeah.
But it sounds great if you do it right.
Yeah.
So that really helped me. When I got to study with Charlie, he looked at me and he said, what was it? Oh, right. It was Firebird. So one of my first lessons was playing the variation in Firebird for him. He said, why are you playing all those fake fingerings? He said, it sounds horrible. And I was like, oh. So he said, use only real fingerings, because for those of us who hear intonation, we know the difference. And I was like, okay. So then I started using real fingerings. Now, you can go either way on everything. I agree.
Sure.
And you go too far with anything. But it really helped me, because what I was doing with fake fingerings, they speak a lot easier and they come out fast. And so I was losing my sense of inner rhythm, because I would
interesting.
I could nail this. And then it'd be like, yeah, but that's not what the piece is about.
It was almost too easy. Yeah.
That's the problem. Sometimes you can go too far with something that's
right.
And so using the real fingerings would hold my fingers so that I could actually, especially in the Firebird variation, because once the triplets come out, that's actually the slowest denomination of rhythm that you play in the entire excerpt. You need to hold them, and you need to take time with them, and then you could be lyrical with them rather than, shooting them all out.
Right,
So stuff like that was very helpful. But learning keeping fingerings, and now in the orchestra so many times, I don't know what it is. Like one day, this fingering feels great. Then the next day, that fingering isn't really happening. So I've got to have a whole arsenal of different fingerings to get through the moment. And I remember this happens all the time now. Like I will be performing something and I'll use a completely different fingering because my body says I need to use this today. Because of the resistance or what is happening musically.
Yeah.
And if you can always get one step ahead of the game, meaning you can anticipate what is the best thing for you at that moment. Our brain is a computer. So if you're able to just jump ahead of the game a little bit and be in the moment, you can make. That's why I feel like we can always do something better if we keep pushing ourselves to try something new.
Yeah, great comments. Great comments. So I think we're going to be going to questions soon, but I have one last question for you. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing this today. It's wonderful to talk to you. If there's a trade secret that you didn't know when you were growing up, that you know now, that you or a technique of some sort that you have incorporated into your own playing, what would that be for you?
Okay. I think, well, I know my flaws, and we all know our flaws. So for me, my fingers are my downfall. So I have to spend a lot of time really, it didn't used to be, but maybe because I'm more critical of myself, I realize that for me, lyrical lines and being able to play legato in all the registers, that's always been, so voicing has always been really a strong suit for me. And also the cooperative resistance of the reed and the mouthpiece and my air support. That has always grown. So I feel like things got much easier for me when I realized that I did the strength training that I needed to do with my diaphragm pressure, learning how to get the right combination of reed resistance and air support. My technique started to skyrocket. More than, instead of just plateauing, this whole idea of maintenance is important as we get older, but I want to go further. I want to feel like it's not about maintenance. It's like, how can I do better? So I feel like as long as I'm staying true, and we're all our worst critics, there's no doubt about it. We wouldn't do what we do. It's so OCD that if you're not your worst critic, then I don't know how you can keep pushing yourself. But I do know that if I constantly hold myself to a particular standard, which is that I never want my sound to diminish in any way. I always want my sound to be the first thing that grabs somebody's attention is the beauty of sound. No matter how technical something is, I just want it to always be beautiful. Yeah. I know there are exceptions. You can play Xenakis or you could play some things in Stravinsky that are meant to be painful, and that's fine. But in general, I always feel as long as I have a beautiful sound and I have good air support, then I think that for me, most of the technical things will fall into place. But I do, if I was to go back and change something with the knowledge I have now, it would be to make sure that I would always not try to practice things too quickly, too soon. I tend to, I used to, and I still have this form of impatience where I know how I played it yesterday. Why am I not playing it as well today? And I was like, look, you gotta slow down, buddy, because you're putting the cart before the horse. Some days, we got to drop a couple rungs in the ladder to get up three, right? So that's amazing. That's what I would try to say.
Great answer. Wonderful, wonderful. So I think we're maybe almost back to Sean, if you're there and gonna have some questions for us.
Here we are. That's an absolutely great conversation you guys had. I love. I think the funniest moment for me was that what'd you say? The E flat clarinet, everything is fake or something.
Yeah,
like that.
that's great.
Someone's got to put that on a inspirational poster or something. I love it.
Hard for the diehard E flat clarinetists out there. I don't know. For me, it was that way.
Excellent. So we do have some questions rolling in here, but I wanted to start off with one that I actually asked Boris Alekverjan last week. He lives in Los Angeles, so this will be kind of the opposite question for you. Los Angeles is an incredibly hot city, of course, also very humid, but Chicago is having pretty harsh winters sometimes. So is there any special considerations as a clarinetist that you've taken for care of your instruments or reeds, or any tips for people who also live in that kind of climate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super meticulous about when I finish playing the clarinet, how I'm constantly blowing water out of every possible tone hole and pad, and to the extent where it's like, I know I'm always the last person off the stage. Always, always. I may be pretty close to the first one on stage, and I'm always the last one off. And it's mainly because I'm so meticulous about maintaining, the only humidity I want in the instrument is if I use humidifiers in the case. And now I've got a Lomax case that I use, which is really fantastic. And I mean, it's funny. It's such a habit for me. I still do the same amount of work that I would do anyway, but I'm comfortable knowing that the humidity is being much more regulated by the humidity packets that are in the case, and how airtight the seal is on the case itself. So, but as far as with reeds, I have a series of meticulous ways of how I polish my reeds from the very, very beginning before I even play them. I'm sealing my reeds more than saying sanding. I'm polishing them from the very, very beginning. So for me, by the 7th or 8th polishing session, my reeds really don't change that much. And I've been really, really fortunate that no matter what climate happens, or even if I travel to different altitudes, say if I go up to Vail, I was being told by so many people, oh, you need to play a 3.5, you got to forget those 5s, they're not going to work. And I would use my 5s. And the thing is because they just wouldn't change. They wouldn't change. And I think that's just a real meticulous way of trying to maintain some sort of stability. It's hard enough to just play the clarinet anyway, but if you could find, and I know that's why a lot of people go to the plastic reeds, because they're reliable, and they don't work for me, but for me, polishing the reeds, I'm still able to keep some sense of, I'm very confident that they're going to work. They're going to work. Now, the truth is, sometimes I might have to manipulate them in a different way off of the mouthpiece. Mm-hmm. I don't care. I play a reed upside down as long as it works. I'm not.
Well, you might as well play in a 5. That's a really strong reed.
Oh, oddly enough, I always played on 5s for the most part, but it was a different mouthpiece. I started on a Van Doren 5RB lyre, and that's what I used through high school until the junior year of college. And then Kenny Grant encouraged me to switch to a pine. And it was like the hardest switch ever, because I was like, I have no sound. I'm blowing my brains out. I'm not getting anything out of the instrument. And he was insisting. He said, no, you know what? You do sound better. It just is a lot more work, but that will change. It's string training. And so from that moment on, I've never switched. It's funny. I maybe started on a 4 to accommodate for the resistance. But literally by the time a year later, I was always using 5s, and that's what I used at the Met or in CSO or even at the Philharmonic. That's always been my thing.
Wow, the steel embouchure.
I use a lot of. I definitely use a lot of muscular pressure for that.
I love that. So we've got some listener questions that have rolled in. Alberto Carrion is asking if you have any helpful tips for improving his tonguing speed. He says that tonguing speed is his kryptonite. He just
well, tonguing speed, I'm sure Richard has lots of answers too, so I don't want to monopolize this. For me, tonguing speed has to do with tongue tension, and it has to do with the type of air column that you're using. So whether your air column is slow and wide, depending on the type of color that you're trying to create, I find that the air and tongue need to be in the opposite direction. So the more air and the more dimension, the compact, as I always try to say, the faster the air speed and the more compact the dimension of the air column, the lighter the tongue needs to be. The wider the air column and the slower the speed, the more you can use more tongue pressure. But that's not helping you with speed. In my personal opinion, the best way that we can have a great articulation, a fast, effortless articulation, is to learn how to lighten the tongue pressure and to know that it's not a massive movement. It's the smallest possible movement. It's all from the incisors forward. And I keep my tongue extremely elevated the entire time.
Yeah.
In the entire oral cavity, I feel the molars of my teeth. My tongue is right up there against the molars the entire time. So the only movement is in the front. I think probably if it's probably a safe thing to say that, and I find this with most clarinet players today, is that just because you can make a sound doesn't mean it's your best sound. And most of the time people use too light of a setup, meaning too light of a reed. So you're not used to using a fast compressed air column because, it's a light reed. You could just blow easily through the clarinet and you get a sound. But I think because of orchestral playing and learning how to make the best parts of your sound carry to the back of the hall, there needs to be, I'm not saying I don't want you to get a hernia and you don't need to play fives, but you do need to know how to have a cooperative resistance. So if I try to play with a very, very slow airspeed and I just try to sort of exhale into the clarinet, I typically won't get a sound. And that means that I have to use a combination of embouchure pressure, diaphragm pressure, and then I can produce the sound that I want to hear based on the amount of air pressure and reed resistance. So that's that. And as soon as I figured that out, there wasn't anything that I couldn't do at a tonguing speed. Now, of course, I multiple tongue as well. So I interchange single tonguing and double and triple tonguing all the time. But you should be able to tongue as fast as you need to. You should be able to get to about 140, 144 with a single tongue if you use the right kind of air and you have the right resistance setup. Cooperative, not just all resistance, but cooperative.
Totally. Love that. Richard, do you have anything to add? Or?
That's a great answer. I mean, I basically ditto because I think the lighter that you can get the muscle of the tongue to be, the faster, and especially in the high register, because thinking about the amount of vibrations that the reed has to create, playing a high E, for instance, is much faster than a low E. And you can bite all you want and tongue as hard as you want on a low E, it's going to work, but a high E is just not going to do that. So I also think that the variation of articulations from the lowest range of the clarinet to the highest range of the clarinet has to vary, and in order to get the same sound even. So you have to be aware in your ears to be creating the same quality of articulation. It's much more about the quality of it than it is about the speed. So the lighter, the lighter you can get the articulation to be, in those rows number fours, and not like that, but like super long at first, because as you get older, you want that versatility of the speed.
Well, this is interesting too, because it's one of those things that's kind of a musical disconnection for students. I mean, they think that at the beginning, the clarinet is kind of just a tube that you blow into and press the fingers, but all these sensitivities about the range you're talking about, those are some pretty advanced some concepts that really need to be considered and musically sort of crafted. So
I agree. And it's actually something that, I think everyone should talk about it from the beginning, because, students are really smart and you got to give them everything now, and they'll pick it all up and figure it out. Yeah.
Well, too many times I go to a band program too, and the teacher wants a do or a toe sound out of the group. So the kids intuitively are dropping their tongue in their mouth. And that might be the sound you want, but I always explain to them, that's not what you need to do to get that result. So always listen and act a little differently in that way. So we've got some questions here from some big names that are rolling in. This one's from Bradford Bain. He says, Steve, I think you addressed this a bit at the beginning. He says, Steve, can you discuss how your orchestral voice has evolved?
I guess, when I was at the Met, there would be moments when you would have to shine, whether it was a solo moment or whether you were leading the wind section at times with something, even if it was tutti, that you were the dominant voice and, you had to sort of be at the forefront of the wind section. I found that especially true in opera, that I feel like the clarinet is the leader of the wind section in opera. Now in the symphonic world, oboists typically are the leaders. And I feel like, I think what ended up happening for me was that because I came out of the pit and then I was on stage, there's the pressure that you are the show rather than sometimes more of an accompaniment figure in opera. And I think what ended up happening was that I began, and to top it off, I went from an incredible acoustic at the Met where you can do anything you want, and it is not only nurtured, it blossoms. So if I was trying something new or a new form of articulation or a new form of phrasing, it just, oh my gosh, it's like, it just happened. And it was like so organic. It was a joy. When I left that acoustic and went to Orchestra Hall here in Chicago, it's like playing in a desert. So the sound goes nowhere. And then what ends up happening is most people who play on that stage who aren't accustomed to what you really need to do force their sound. And as you force your sound, then it gets more small and narrow. And not only is your dynamic range, diminished greatly, but forget having color. You sound like you're playing on a pea shooter. So the crazy thing is I had to remember that the reason why I won the audition was because I brought my own sense of resonance to the hall. And I tried to relax as much as you can, but trust that what I give is enough. And don't try to fight the hall. If you ever try to fight a hall, you're going to lose. So I began to, and I didn't change my equipment at all. You just got to be comfortable with yourself. It's not comfortable what you don't get back. You have to trust what you put out there. So yes, and then whenever we go on tour, it's an absolute blast because we just basically scale down 50%, sometimes 70% of what we normally would do. And then like the whole orchestra is listening in a completely different way. We're responding to the hall and to each other. And then it's just like chamber music. But in the hall, I very rarely can hear the first violins, and they have huge sounds, but their sound just goes out and it never comes back. So a lot of what I do is visual on that stage and just learning how to trust where I play and how I play and not trying to force anything I worked so hard to develop so that you don't get negative returns. So that's how I think my voice is developed or changed.
I love that. It's as if you could see the next two questions, because I think you answered Maury Bakun's and Jay Dubin's question as well. They were asking similar things about just operatic and orchestral careers. So this has just been a great conversation. I do want to be mindful of the time. It's now 3:00, but I do definitely want to thank both you and Richard for taking the time to come on today, and Richard for hosting, doing another episode of this. I think this will be the last one of these for a little while, but we will talk about some more coming up in the future. And before we go, Richard and Stephen, did you have any last things to add to the conversation?
Let's see. Well, we'll have, I think we have one more on.
Oh, there is one more. My mistake.
Yeah. And Michael Wayne, actually from Eastman, will be on in 2 weeks. And then I think next week we'll interview Ben Lulich through Bakun's site. And but Steve, it's so wonderful to talk to you, and I wish you all the best, and just congratulations on all your amazing success, really.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to speak with both of you, and thank you for inviting me. I had a great time. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Clarinet podcast. No matter where you're listening, be sure to subscribe so you can get access to future episodes for free right to your device. Next time will be a conversation between Richard Hawkins and Michael Wayne of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. I want to thank Richard again for coming on to guest host these 4 episodes of the show, and I do hope that he'll come back in the future for more. If you have an idea for a guest host or for just a regular guest, or if you want to be a guest yourself even on the podcast, you can send me a message at feedback@clarinet.com. If you did enjoy the show today, I'd love it if you'd leave a review on iTunes. It's been almost a year since someone left a review, which makes me kind of sad, honestly. It's nice to hear from people all over the world. And if you listened all the way to the end today, you are the prime target market for my Patreon page. Now, what this is a way to get access to an extended, ad-free episode of the show for as little as $1 per month. And like I said, if you're here listening right now at the end, you're one of not actually that many people who listen to a podcast who make it to the end. I think it's like 60%, get distracted or drop off halfway through of a lot of episodes, even Clarinet, believe it or not. But I want to thank those who are contributing more than $10 a month. That's Robert W., Jason S., Glenn K., David S., Andrew M., William L., Miguel D., Debbie A., Patty S., Josh N., and Karen D. Thank you so much for making the show possible. And thank you also, of course, to our sponsors. We have Legere Reads, which are a wonderful way to take advantage of the most practice time that you can get. And what I mean by that is, guests have talked about on the show even before, but you can take all that time that you've been adjusting and fiddling with your reeds and put it into your practice. And what I love about Legere Reads is, if you have a plastic clarinet or a clarinet that you're able to leave out, you can also leave the reed on the mouthpiece and just have it ready to go. I can't tell you how many clinic situations or playing situations in the past this has been very valuable to have a reed that doesn't require moistening before being played. It's a real game changer, and if you've never experienced that before, it will definitely be a cool thing the first time you realize how awesome that is. So you can check Legere Reads out at legere.com, or actually Bakun is now carrying them on their website, and this is the other sponsor of our show here today. Bakun Musical Services, you can get 10% off your next accessory or any purchase now at the website by using code Clarinet at checkout. This is everything from mouthpieces, barrels, bells, care kits, anything that's on their website. You can save 10% with code Clarinet at bakunmusical.com. Thank you so much for listening again today, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Clarinet Podcast, the show for clarinetists. I'm your host, Sean Perrin, signing off from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.